Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Scoop podcast. I'm Judith Lewis here with David Bain, and we are just starting off collecting all the people onto the webcast version. The people who are here watching us online, you guys are going to get something special because you're going to get the stuff that the podcast listeners just don't get, including a view of my lovely self and David and our wonderful guests. I hope you've got your tea and cookie ready.
You're going to have to start off the show every single week.
Jesus Christ, that was an amazing introduction. I want you just to announce anything. I'm like...
I can announce your carrots and live.
I think you should announce your books now because just before we went on air, you were introducing your books to everyone. So I think you should announce a few of your books to the audience.
Do you want specific titles? Because that I don't know about that. And other titles are available. So you'll see behind me on the various shelves that you have some rather educational books. The top shelf is all of the old server books. Yes, I am that old that I did have to work with NT Windows Server number 4. It's that low number. I am that old. You'll also see just below that some lovely marketing books. And you'll notice a particular author. I went a little bit crazy on Amazon that day and bought a whole bunch of Seth Godin books, but other ones as well. You'll see just below that I then get a little eclectic with the whole cookbook theme coming in, and also some fantasy books because I'm an avid fantasy reader. And then just below that, my first editions and university books. So, if you're ever interested in my book collection, there you go. I had a crazy university career as well. Some of you may know from previous web starts what kind of courses I took.
So stay tuned, folks. You have actually tuned into the correct channel if you want to watch Marketing Scoop live. You haven't actually entered some alternate universe.
I just want to listen to you, Judith. You're awesome. I'm enjoying this a lot.
It's all about marketing, right?
So we've got a few people joining us live, so that's great. If you're joining us live, say hi, say yo in the chat. We've got one of our guests who has already said yo in the chat. We'll be introducing our guests proper in the next couple of minutes. When we do the proper introduction, we're going to be recording a podcast live on YouTube. And of course, the audio version of the show is going to go out in the next few hours, and you can subscribe to that. You can subscribe to that at semrush.com/podcast if you want to check that out, if you're not a subscriber to the audio show already. But those of you watching live, it's always great to have you on board as well. If you've got any questions for our guests, keep on asking them in the YouTube chat, and we'll try and keep an eye on that as well. We're going to be talking about podcast marketing, how to market a podcast today. So if you've got any questions in relation to that, if you've started a podcast and you're wondering to promote that, you're thinking of starting that, and you're wondering what kind of promotional strategies you can use, then this is the show that you should be listening to. So remember to say hi in the chat, say where in the world you happen to be from. It's great just to get a feel for where our audience are coming from in terms of location as well as backgrounds there. But let's actually start the show proper. So what we're going to do just now is hit the intro music, start the proper intro, and that will be the start of the actual podcast. So let's get going with that. Marketing Scoop Season 2, Episode 15, How to Market a Podcast. Broadcasting live on the Semrush YouTube channel, this is Marketing Scoop. I'm David Bain.
And I'm Judith Lewis, and welcome to the Semrush show that reveals the latest digital trends and technologies that impact your marketing strategy.
So together with industry experts, we delve into SEO, advertising, and content marketing to uncover the ultimate recipe for digital marketing success. Let's get straight on to meeting today's guests, though. First up, a man with a serious addiction to Star Wars and DC Comics. He quit his first and only real job back in 2005, and since then has built several globally successful design and marketing SaaS businesses, including productivity and podcast websites. Welcome to the co-founder of Rebel Base Media, Mark Asquith.
I didn't know what you were going to say when you said addiction.
Yes, you did, but you just hoped I wouldn't.
That could have been bad. Hiya, mate. You all right?
Good to have you, mate.
And next up, the host of Life, Love, and Entrepreneurship, podcast, a show that he's managed to get featured in the new and noteworthy section of iTunes twice. He's the founder of London agency Pearl Lemon. Welcome, Deepak Shukla.
Hello, Judith and everybody else. I was wondering if I was going to be met with an addiction, but that title goes singularly to Mark. So well done, Mark.
Yes.
Addiction to carrots, maybe. So let's go back to Mark first. Mark, I've been asked to ask you to tell me about the beard.
Well, it's something that I can't help. It's something that all us males are afflicted with. Just sadly, it takes me a little longer to grow a lesser quality beard than many other men that I know. And it's something that I'm trying to get over, a little counseling, little help, and a little beard oil. But we're getting there. And what you'll not realize, Judith, is that when I shave this off, I get ID'd for buying lottery tickets. So it's as much of a logistical thing as it is an aesthetic thing.
So it's all about the presentation of your visage.
I just want to be able to get served for beer. That's all, Judy.
Yeah, it's just less harassment down the pub.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, actually, the real true first question is for you, Mark. You must have been on around 1,000 or so, 1 million podcast episodes. What types of episodes tend to get the best traction?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm going to kind of break this answer down into two categories. So the types of episode and the format of episode. So the types of episode that I always seem to get better traction with are the episodes that actually help people with something. And I'm going to say something controversial here. Like, I am tired and I am sick to death of people saying I add value with my podcast. Okay, that's like a plumber turning up to my house and saying, I am a plumber, I can do plumbing. All right, if you're not adding value, then there's no point you being kind of some entrepreneurial or businessy or marketing style podcaster. So I just kind of want to get that out of the way, because what I find tends to work best is content that educates or entertains. All right. This is the one thing that we all forget, is that this podcasting medium is not just a marketing tool. It's a media. It's like if you turn up and you watch something on Netflix and it's just simply not very good, you ain't going to keep watching it. It's got to entertain you. It's got to educate you. So they're the kind of things that do really well. If you can give an in-depth tutorial, if you can uncover something really specific. So the episodes that do well for me are things like how we decreased our churn by integrating personal videos, very specific things. And then the second type of thing, which is more the format setup, is that so many people are doing interview shows now. And I'm starting to see that I get better traction when it's me talking about the tech business. It's me saying, okay, look, last week we had a dip in sales. Here's what happened. So they're the two things: education, entertainment, where you're giving something a specific solution to a specific problem, and then solo episodes that really go deep into something that you've been through recently. So yeah, but that's what I'd say.
So something where you're relating something personal in the podcast itself. It's not just about interviewing, it's about exposing, so to speak, stuff that people might not otherwise see.
Yeah, definitely, because most people do interview shows. I mean, if you think about any interview show, like, there's a huge marketing issue in podcasting insofar as we just create content and we don't do anything else with it. So if you're an interview show, it's very easy to pat yourself on the back and say, well, I've done my interview this week. I'll get it out there, do a few quotables on social media. And then what do? Is I forget looking at that one and I move on to the next interview. And I think I'm doing really well, because all I'm doing is interviewing. But there's nothing really high quality coming out of that. It's why these kind of town hall, this 4-way conversation style format works. So you've got to, I think if you're going to do an interview style show, you've got to understand what can you take from that guest that no one else has taken? Like, what can you get them to share and to give insights on that no one else has gotten them to share? And if you can do that, then you'll be successful with the interviews, I think.
So are episodes with guests actually easier to promote then?
I actually think they're more difficult to promote, and I'll tell you why. The reason is simple. I've been on about 1,000 podcasts, and I've been on about 1,000 podcasts. So what's the point in you marketing me versus someone else? And unless you've got a particular angle, which is David and Judith and Deepak speak to Mark about podcast marketing, which is not something I talk that much about, there's no angle. Whereas if it's you yourself, no one has got your own mix of experience and thoughts and ethics and values and dreams and goals. No one's got that mix that you've got. So it's easier to market yourself than it is a guest. And the other thing to consider, most people are doing the rounds. Let's be honest. You'll see someone with a book out and they do the round and they talk about the same thing. You're not doing anything unique. So I think solo shows are easier to promote. I really do.
Wow, interesting. Well, Deepak, I'll throw that out to you as well. From your point of view, what types of episodes tend to get the best traction from your side?
I think there's a lot of really interesting points that Mark made that I think I agree with. Well, to answer your question, actually, initially, which podcasts or types of podcasts do I do that get the most traction? It's podcasts that carry some kind of either tangible action. So, I've got a podcast, for example, called From 15 to 60K a Month Realizations. Also, in line with that, I've got some other podcasts that do well, which might have a keyword or something that's popular. So I read the book called David Goggins Can't Hurt Me, which is quite popular at the moment. And I just talked about my thoughts on that podcast. So those two are practical insights. I think the third element of it is people's attention spans are getting shorter. Everybody gets bored faster and faster. What someone might notice about my podcasts, the longest podcast, I know that Mark mentioned he's got like the 7-minute podcast. My podcasts are never longer than 7 minutes. Also, I am anti-interview. I don't bring anyone on my show. It's literally just me blabbering. I will be cooking mushrooms and you'll hear sizzling in the background. I recorded a podcast just before and I was like, right, I'm burning the pasta, but I'm burning the pasta, and I can confirm that as a man I can't multitask because all I'm thinking about is burning the pasta. And what I think is useful and does really relate to audiences is, as Mark said, number one, be relatable. The way that personalization is moving today is that people want to know the man behind the mask. Marketing advice per se is becoming a little bit commodified. No one wants to know about the 7 tips to build LinkedIn profile. They also want to know about your particular story, your journey that's attached to that profile. So personalization, I think, is huge, which relates to that element of it. I think that the point that Mark made about promotion. See, the problem that I have with people coming onto my show, or me, for example, going onto other shows and then them asking me to promote them, there's a lot of context that becomes a problem. If I'm on 15 podcasts in a month, I'm not going to promote all 15 podcasts to my audience because it's going to seem spammy. They're going to get annoyed. The podcast might be, for my own personal reasons, I might find that's not a great fit, or my audience have already heard the same message, or all of these variations. And for that reason, I just, I go on podcasts, but it becomes very difficult for me to then share them with my audience, because I'm like, my audience don't just want me to, RSS feed a bunch of podcasts onto my LinkedIn profile and be like, hey, I'm fundamentally talking about very similar things for the last 15 podcasts. So why don't you come and listen to me talk about this? So I think that there's all of these practicalities, and what that lends itself towards, which is what, again, Mark spoke about, it's very easy to coast. Everything, I think, today has to be about, and this is really, the core of it, pattern interrupts. You have to do something that interrupts what people are used to, because I think that it's really useful and, to be your own devil's advocate, meaning that, what is your BS radar telling you about the kind of content that you tune into? What are the first 30-second impressions you have of either a podcast, its length, the people that are on there that will draw you to someone, or that will make you think, hey, we're going to talk about exactly the same stuff that we talk about with everybody. And I'm going to, because what's really quickly happening, as has happened with blog content, people are producing filler podcasts.
Interesting.
So guys, sorry, can you hear me and see me okay?
I can, both.
You can both. Okay, great. The reason I'm asking, actually, the wonders of doing live video is my Chrome has done something very strange, and all the Chrome windows that are open and active have just gone black, and I can't retrieve anything. But I'm not going to try and change the situation, because obviously we're connected now. You can still see me fine. I can't see you, but that's fine. We're recording the audio. I might take out this little interlude in the audio version, but it's a bonus version in the video, of course. But it was just to make you aware of the fact that I can't see you, so I may interrupt in the conversation at places that are inappropriate. But I've got any kind of notes open on my phone in front of me here as well, so that's cool.
We're all gesticulating wildly.
Well, I'll just have to imagine, and that's probably quite a good thing. I'm quite interested in what you're both saying about the shorter attention span and the shorter podcast. Obviously, Mark doing the 7-minute mentor, you saying Deepak that actually you haven't done a show that's much longer than that. Is that out of testing that you've decided to do a show that length, or is that just because you prefer doing shows that length? Because if you look at someone like Joe Rogan, he publishes shows that are about 2 hours in length, and they're one of the most popular shows out there. So how much research versus gut instinct is that about?
I think that all the research is there and obviously in front of us. Joe Rogan is an exception who proves a rule. If I went and did a podcast for 2 hours, I guarantee you no one would listen to it. Now, why do I guarantee that, and where does my data come from? I look at all of the other media sources in terms of video content, for example. I think that people need to look at marketing in terms of like its sequential rollout. First came, for example, blogs. Blogs were produced, and Google, of course, does say that it does like rank very well and index long form content. But also within long form content, you notice that people do TLDRs, too long didn't read. They'll also do bullet points. They'll also ask you to bookmark them. Everybody recognizes that they do it for Google, but I personally don't know that I would go through a long form technical blog post for 2 hours in one shot. I'd take it away in piecemeal. The second element that you'd look at it on is just video, you know, IGTV, Facebook, etc. And then the third, and because of those reasons, I think that podcasts will follow. And then there's also a huge element, I think, of just practicality to it, that many people that want to attempt to enter podcasts will be scared off by the idea of organizing a guest for an hour a week and all of the logistics around it. And there's an element of, I think, pragmatism, as well as, you know, looking at my own attention span. When was the last time that I listened, for example, with the exception perhaps of Joe Rogan, and even Joe Rogan, if you'll also notice, produces Joe Rogan Shorts, or I don't know what they're quite called on his second YouTube channel, but you can, he'll take some, you know, an interview with Elon Musk, for example, the one where he was smoking, he smoked weed or something to that effect. That was cut up into short segments, and it's the segments that actually drive traction to the main video, and Joe Rogan does that excellently. So I think that, you know, there's of course the abundance of people that, you know, do go into the idea that the longer is better, but the problem, or the inverse idea, is that what often happens is people don't produce short content that's very good, so therefore they fill it with longer content. So that's where I think the market is moving, or has moved, and they're my reasons why. And then, of course, as I said, just to reiterate once again, selfishly, I think it's much easier for people to enter into the podcast world knowing that they can record something, as long as it's, you know, informational and educational and entertaining for 7 minutes, as opposed to 70 minutes. It's like, Jesus Christ, that's quite a scary notion.
I mean, I do understand that, and I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm not sure that I would completely buy that for myself as the way to do that. I think first of all, you've got commuters that certainly in London maybe have an average commute time of nearly an hour or so. So they've got that time to consume an audio show. I'll consume long audio podcasts. And I also feel that personally, if I'm motivated by having a conversation with someone over half an hour or longer than half an hour, then I would assume that a listener would be just as keen to find out more about who I'm talking to and more about that conversation itself. So I'm a little bit maybe concerned about saying definitively short is definitely the best, and long isn't quite so good. But Mark, perhaps you might disagree with me there. What are your thoughts on that one?
Who listens to audiobooks?
I haven't really got into it significantly.
I do, of course, because I mentioned David Goggins Can't Hurt Me. There
you go, exactly. And what happens when you've finished listening to to an audiobook on your commute? You literally just press pause. Doesn't matter. So I think I've got 3 ways to come at this one, and I actually agree with both of you. And I'll come at this first of all from David's perspective, which is that blogging and video are completely active pastimes. You have to be present and giving your attention to that one thing. Podcasts are passive. It's a totally different medium. Just like the radio, like we don't think I'm not going to listen to this Bon Jovi song because I'm running for 3 minutes and it's a 4-minute song. We don't think like that. We simply don't think like that. And if you're listening to Bon Jovi, fair play. You know, we all have a bit of John. But, you know, that's the difference is, number one, it's passive. Number two, and Deepak, you're absolutely right in what Joe Rogan does. And Apple and the rest of the podcasting world help us along with this. And what they do is, 18 months ago, they gave us 2 new tags to play with. They said that we can cast this out as a trailer for a show. So Elon Musk, I can give you all the salient points that Elon said in this 3-minute trailer. And if that's all you want to read, you pick the episode version that is the trailer or the bonus. You know, we've now got tags available to us to allow us to do that, which then applies to the 2 types of people that David and Deepak, you two both addressed. The third angle is, honestly, I run a podcast hosting company, and I can categorically tell you that the data says it does not matter, because it simply does not matter. The goal is, just like any product, just like any content, is to market this thing. You know, and if you market this thing, doesn't matter whether I've got to press pause and I carry on listening to it when I get back in the car. It simply doesn't matter. And David, you hit on a really good point, which was that engaging storytelling, that guest. And I think what we sometimes do as podcasters and as particularly people in marketing, we think that we've got to, like I said, we've got to be adding value or we've got to be interviewing. We don't have to. We can just tell really bloody good stories. That's why when we fall asleep watching The Last Jedi, the next night we start from where we left off, where we fell asleep. We don't think never watching that again. You know, so it's as long as we tell stories that matter, and as long as we market not the podcast but the story, then people will tune in. And I do think both points are valid. You can fill a 45-minute podcast with 39 minutes of rubbish, but at the same time, you can force yourself to be succinct when there's no need to be. You can go deeper. And I do think 2 types of people exist. I ain't watching a video that's longer than 3 minutes, not a chance, but I will listen to a podcast because I can do it in multiple sittings. So that's my thought.
So
Interesting.
So this is a podcast episode that focuses on success stories, and it would be good to zero in on a particular episode that both of you have published and an episode that has been particularly successful, and just to get a feel for your publishing process, the content that went alongside that episode in terms of show notes, the content of the episode, and why you think it was more successful than the majority of other episodes that you've published. So Deepak, can we get your thoughts on this first? You know, one particular episode of yours that you've published in the past and why you think it was particularly successful.
Yeah, sure. I'm just looking at my podcast analytics, and I had one that was released on the 4th of January that it's 6 minutes long, and it had 7 hours of listen time. So that's good. It's a lot of listen time for a 6-minute podcast. Just that one that recently. My process, just to speak through that briefly, I use the SoundCloud recording app, the actual app, and I will literally like kind of hit record when I'm doing something and I have a moment of inspiration per se. I'll then quickly title it. There's 3 tags that I'll use. Well, I say tags, but titles: life, love, or entrepreneurship, to denote what that actual show is going to focus around, thereby giving the audience the opportunity to just maybe skip it. I was talking about love. I don't want to listen, for example. And then once I have recorded it on the actual SoundCloud app, I'll then put a picture up, which will literally be a silly selfie of my own face because I'm there. Then that will via RSS go to Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, iTunes, and then I'll use the app called repurpose.io to then have it go up to YouTube, where it will stay unlisted. Once that gets unlisted, my SEO team will get notified and begin going in and start adding tags and changing covers and doing stuff with it. So that will be kind of the process, with the ultimate thing that I just need to zero in on is producing obviously a good couple of minutes of content. So that's, I think, of course, as Mark made reference to, important that you produce good content, and then there's an infrastructure behind it that can really help leverage what you're doing. Repurpose.io, I think, also publishes to my Facebook like page as well, I believe.
So are you saying that from a content perspective and from a promotional perspective, there wasn't really anything different that you did to other episodes? So it's likely that it was the title of your show and the fact that it was about a particular topic that resonated with people that probably made it more successful than other episodes. And just tagging on to the end of that question, if so, how do you actually research the topics that you decide to talk about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So did I do anything differently beyond the actual subject matter with that podcast? The answer is no. I didn't do anything in terms of my process that was decidedly different. I think that is typical of the way that people get hits. You can do all of the right things, and then it'll only be the 10th time that it takes off. And the reasons for it happening in that, extent sometimes remain a bit of a mystery. What I can say about the topics that, I choose to cover, and that one in particular, which was called Getting Over Life's Challenges. I think that, at the heart of each of my podcasts, I try and focus upon, it's really the universal themes of life, love, and entrepreneurship. I think they're all connected, and I think that this really relates to, one of the reasons that, Joe Rogan, for example, also does fabulously well beyond being an entertainer, and us, it being the kind of Joe Rogan show. I think that there's universal themes that relate to everybody that I think it's important to encompass within whatever message that you're talking about. So whether you're coming from a marketing perspective, or you're coming from an entrepreneurial perspective, or even a love perspective, I think all of those areas conjoin. And that particular title, Life Getting Over Life's Challenges, related to, singular problems that I had that touched everything that I do. And that was what perhaps was different about that show, when ordinarily I would just maybe focus in on one thing. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Interesting. No, that's good. It's good to try and understand your process to begin with, and then zero in on what perhaps made the difference. And it looks like it was quite simply the topic and, importantly, the title of the show that you published there that really made the difference. Mark, what about yourself? What about a particular episode that you published in the past that was particularly successful, and why that was?
So there's probably two that I can think of. There's number one, which was the end of my first volume of podcasting, which was Why I've Stopped Podcasting. And it was an episode which was, look, here's everything that I've learned. This is a few years ago now. And basically all the lessons that I've learned from doing interview podcasts. And, then I stopped doing interview podcasts off the back of that insight. And people really liked that one. So that was a good one. But probably the bigger one was as part of a season that I did. So I also do seasonal podcasting. And I know that my personal brand founders, audience are founders that generally follow me because I tell the story of how we're building Rebel-Based Media. And I did a season based on the feedback that they gave me, which was a straight talking guide to launching your first product. It was an 8 episode season, and it went pretty deep, but I brought an expert in from each particular area. So I did a session on how to validate your idea. And then we had people like Ash Moria, we had people like Kai Wilkinson, Phil Pallen, we had all sorts of different experts on various parts of building your first product out. And that was a really interesting process. That did really, really well, purely because they'd asked me for, how have you built X product? And I just talked them through the steps that I'd taken. And what I interestingly did for that, which is an interesting marketing exercise for it, was I put 2 episodes behind an email wall. And for every episode, what I did was I did like a 6-episode series. The 6th episode was the full final thing. It wasn't like, okay, there's 2 more, and to give you the answers, we're gonna make you give us the email address. Like the 6th episode was the finished article. But there were 2 more. There was like how to review your success, and then some growth hacks on another one. But for each episode, I put out a content upgrade. So I said, okay, look, this one's about branding, okay? How do you bootstrap brand your startup? How do you bootstrap brand this new product that you've not got any money to invest? Download this particular branding briefing tool. And I did that for each episode. And the one that did really well on that was, I think it's called Blue Tack and Sellotape, how to build your product without any money, basically. Something along those lines. And the reason that did so well was because it was a complete package of content. You know, you could listen to the full season, or if you listen to that one episode, it basically gave you everything you need. It was like, okay, here's the background, here's the action that you need to take, here's a resource that you can download to actually enable you to take that action, and then here's a next step if you need a hand with it. So that was how I planned it and executed it, and that did really well. That whole season did well, and that episode in particular really stood out.
I love that as well, because I think both of your tips there shout out at me: design your content and your episode titles for users. So it's all about user experience, perhaps rather than thinking about search engines or popular keyword phrases to incorporate in titles that maybe thousands of other shows have already done that. Really think about who your target audience are, and designing that content for them is what stands out to me there. Judith, I can't obviously see the YouTube chat at the moment. I'm not sure if there's any questions or chat that's being on. But yeah, if there has, please share it. If not, what kind of thoughts and questions do you have at this stage?
Well, one interesting comment that I've seen come in from Calicube Pro is, are trending topics more important than guests? And that's a question that I had for myself, besides some questions around promotion and whether, you know, traffic from directories like iTunes and whatnot can be important. It's really interesting whether, you know, is it trending topics? Is it that January 4th just happened to be the point in the year when we're all thinking about challenges and overcoming obstacles? Or, you know, is it the topicality of the moment? Is it the zeitgeist, or is it guests, or is it something else that leads to success for podcasts?
Well, I think just to jump in on that, first of all, honestly, guests do not matter. They do not matter. Guests is a really good way of building your network. Having guests on is just a great way of building your network. It will matter not to your content. I've had Guy Kawasaki on. I've had all sorts of people. Honestly, doesn't make any difference. It's the topic that matters. It's what you're talking. If you get Guy Kawasaki talking about something that people care about, that's a 1-2 punch of awesome. But if you get someone unknown talking about someone that people care about, you'll probably do just as well. The topicality is a very interesting point, Judith. And I think what you're starting to see now, so Slate have just recently done it. I think New York Times, Washington Post are doing it. They're doing content which is much more timely. And I think that's one of the next evolutionary steps of podcasting from a tech perspective, is the ability to discover, almost like Twitter does, you know, it's a news source. I think there will be a layer of podcasting that is that kind of very, very, very up to date and very topical kind of content. But the level below that, it is, of course, things like, okay, in January, let's talk about health, fitness, and challenges. Let's talk about what we all want to do this year. Honestly, I think with that one, again, I think it personally, when I look at the stats across our network as a hosting company, and then content that I put out, we tend to see that content that is more honest does well. So it's not another entrepreneur coming out with your greatest challenge today, overcome, or your best year ever, or your best life ever, or, you know, grow more hair this week because it's January and you want to look better for February. All that kind of crap that entrepreneurs put out. You know, it's got to be more honest, you know. And I think if you can tap in to the honesty that your listeners appreciate, like they're not tuning in for your topics, they're tuning in for you delivering your topics. That's the thing you've got to be really understanding of. And I think if you can understand the values and the voice that they expect from you, and then deliver these kind of obvious style topics, but in your style, then I think topicality and that relevance in a timely fashion can be important. But I always say, stick to being yourself with it, you know. And if you wouldn't deliver something that is quote unquote on trend normally, then you certainly don't have to force yourself into doing that just because you think it'll boost your downloads, which might be contrarian, but that's what I think.
And Deepak, not only the same question, but also thinking about tapping into the zeitgeist of the moment, the topicality of the moment, but also thinking about taking people beyond that moment in time, besides tapping into the zeitgeist or tapping into topics as opposed to guests. Is it important to ask people to subscribe? Okay,
both good questions. So I'll answer the second question first. Is it important to ask people to subscribe? Yes. People like being led. I mean, I'm lazy. I would rather you bring me McDonald's to my lap than go out and get it. And if you tell me, Deepak, I'll bring you McDonald's, then that's much better than me needing to figure it out by myself. So I think that, you know, assumptions are, of course, the death of everybody. And there's a lot of truth in that, you know, make what you desire explicit. Don't be implicit, because there's a lot of other more noisy, exuberant, boisterous children in the playground than you that will demand attention. And for those reasons, I think that it's really important that you do ask people to subscribe. I think in terms of what we were discussing as to trending topics and guests, I think two things. I think that there's two key focuses when you have to think about, you know, building a podcast that may become viral. There's discovery. Okay, so you can use some combination of a trending topic or a, you know, well-known guest to help enable the act of discovery, where you can use some kind of hook, because that's what's about, right? What we're talking here really is about a marketing hook. What can I talk about that I can use as a tool to bring people to my show? So that's discovery. Okay, the second element of it is, what can I do to keep people in the room? Because they might come because I've said, hey, you know, I interview David Goggins, or I interview Guy Count. You know, I'd love to interview David Goggins, right? But what if, and this is not David Goggins, but what if I have a guest come on and they're really bloody boring, right? Because that happens a lot. Another question that I think Jason Bernard, I see it in the chat, asked, what do you do with a guest who talks too long, right? So there's a lot of variations that do come out of that. So what we need to really realize, and it's something that I'm discovering as well, that education and entertainment are merging. So it's almost edutainment, if you want to call it that you need to both inform, but you also need to titillate and to surprise and to make your audience smile. So I think that, you know, a combo of those two things are very helpful. In terms of, you know, then the practicalities that sit underneath that, I think for a lot of people, and this is something that I try and work hard to do, is the way that you'll be able to either capitalize on either trending topic like the zeitgeist or guest is to reduce barriers to entry. So when I say reduce barriers to entry, I think it's really important that, you know, you can tune into one of the offerings that Mark has in terms of, you know, the software tools that he's got to ensure that you've got a platform that makes it as easy as hell to live out your place of greatness. If you just want to be around a mic and you want to, you know, because you're an amazing storyteller, then you need to work hard to build everything else around it. So that's all that you can do. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so Deepak, I loved your point there about the fact that education and entertainment, I just about said edutainment, as you said there, is such an important thing to be thinking about now. Because if you think about what users could be doing apart from listening to your podcast, it's doing things like watching films on Netflix, you know, downloading movies on iPlayer or something else. So those also are your competitors. So your competitors aren't necessarily just traditional businesses that do a similar kind of thing to you. It's whoever actually takes up the consumer's attention that you're also trying to reach out to. And I'll tell you what, we could actually keep this conversation going on a lot longer, I'm sure, but we're running out of time here. So this just about takes us up to the end of episode 15 of season 2. Just time for an actionable tip from each of you guys, related to or not necessarily related to what we've been discussing so far.
Okay, so let's go with Deepak first. Deepak, what is your actionable tip, please?
Master the art of storytelling. It's going to be your biggest weapon. You are competing, and this is your advantage, against a lot of people, including myself, who, when it comes to storytelling, are amateurs. We have natural talent, but we're untrained. Go and train and actively learn, as Russell Brunson talks about, and how it transformed his business, ClickFunnels, into a $100 million SaaS company. That as soon as he mastered the art of being able to tell stories and educate through stories, as Tony Robbins and many others have done before him, it can transform your ability to actually retain those who discover you on a podcast. So master the art of storytelling.
Incredible. Thank you very much. You can find Deepak over at deepakshukla.com. That's a DeepakShukla.com.
Thank you.
Now it's Mark's turn. So Mark, what is your actionable tip?
I agree wholeheartedly with that one. That's a great tip, Deepak. And I'm going to give you more of a technical tip now. You know, so many people lose downloads because they're not putting enticing content in the right place in their podcast. So in order for one of the metrics that count towards whether or not a download is verified as a download is, does someone download or stream enough data for it to be classed as 1 minute of audio? So if you are on a streaming platform, and if someone's listening via a stream and they listen to the first minute and just at 45 seconds they tune out, you ain't getting that download counted. It's just simply not going to count. So rather than your pre-roll advertisements, rather than your dodgy intro music, David, I didn't mean you because yours is always wonderful, but rather than just filling it with stuff that doesn't matter, get people hooked. And there are two people that do this really, really well. Aaron Mankey, who runs the podcast Law, he's a good friend and he does great stuff. So check that out, Law. And also for inspiration on that first minute, done really well, check out Your London Legacy, which is a podcast based solely in London. And that first minute is the most enticing first minute you'll hear. And it contributes massively to the overall downloads. So that's my tip.
I love that advice. Thanks so much, Mark. I tell you what, there's so many podcasters out there that have such lengthy intros before they get into the content as well. There are some podcasts that I've listened to, it's about the 7-8 minute mark before you actually get into any meaningful content or the content that they actually promised you beforehand. And if you start doing that consistently, people are either going to switch off or they're going to consistently skip to that point anyway and not listen to your intro stuff anyway. So you've got to blend it. You've got to get to content quickly. Great advice as always, Mark. You can find Mark, of course, over at rebelbasedmedia.io.
No, you can't. Or you can find me at rebelbasemedia.io, David. Come on.
I apologize about that. Okay.
I'm only winding you up.
I know, but that's not a good thing to get right. You need to get the guests' domain names right, and I'm glad you corrected me there because it's not something that you can just let hang out there, especially if there's another site out there on that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say quickly, you can find Mark over at rebelbasemedia.io, and then I'll be able to cut that in to the audio podcast.
You should be a podcaster.
I should do, indeed. It might help. I've been your co-host, David Bain. You can also find me over at digitalmarketingradio.com.
And I've been Judith Lewis, your other co-host. And you can find me at decapit.com and where all good chocolate is sold.
And I'll tell you what, Judith, would you like to say that again?
I don't know. I kind of liked having my own music.
That was quite cool.
That was cool. Got your own theme tune.
Yeah.
Well, I've stopped the music now, so go on, please say it again.
And I've been Judith Lewis, your other co-host. You can find me at decapit.com.
We're recording the next episode, Season 2, Episode 16 of The Scoop, at the same time, same place, the Semrush YouTube channel on Wednesday, the 30th of January. A show that will focus on advertising.
Joining us live will be Niels Roymans from nielsroymans.com. I will spell that for you. NILSROOIJMANS.com. And Michael Fenlon from 7 Star Digital. Sign up at semrush.com/webinar to watch live. And of course, if you liked what you heard today, subscribe for free to the audio podcast as well. Just head over to semrush.com/podcast and find the link to the Scoop on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Android, and all other good podcast stores.
But until next time, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios. And this would normally be where I stop the live video, but I can't stop the live video because I don't have access to my Chrome stuff. So I'm going to come out of Chrome completely. Hopefully that will mean the video gets saved on the SEO Rush channel. If not, you're absolutely definitely going to have to subscribe to the audio podcast. So all I'm able to do is, instead of having a post episode discussion with the wonderful guests and co-hosts that we had today, is say to everyone watching, say to my co-hosts, thank you so much for taking part in today's episode. I think a lot of wonderful content was shared. I look forward to getting this episode published in the next few hours or so. But in the meantime, have a wonderful week, and we'll catch up soon.
And hey, for all of you watching on the webcast, a little bonus tip: go back through our podcast to the one by Bas Vandenbelt on storytelling. Hey, that'll be super useful.
Superb stuff. Catch you later, guys.
Thanks.
Ladies all, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.